The best place to watch anime on all your devices in high definition is Verve. Whether it be the new stuff or the classic anime of the past, Verve's got it. Black Clover, Demon Slayer, Dr. Stone, One Piece, all the episodes streaming right now. Try it for free, vrv.co/geekdom. Use that link to try it for an entire month for free. Recently, I did a video discussing the status of Dragon Ball Super and why it did not return as originally planned in 2019. And one of the main talking points of that video was that Toriyama, the original creator, had not yet submitted a new story to Shueisha, to Toei, to continue the series, and that for the manga, even though Toriyama did come up with the idea for the Moro arc, he was not writing the consistent story. It was Toyotaro with Toriyama as consultant, whereas the previous arcs, like the Trunks arc, the Tournament of Power, and the Broly movie, of course, that was all pretty much Toriyama's conception, with Toyotaro and Toei adding to it with the anime and the manga. Now, I wanted to discuss a little bit of the history of Toriyama when it comes to writing Dragon Ball Super and kind of elaborating a little bit on sort of why Toriyama hasn't really submitted his story yet and why it's not really that surprising. Now, I don't actually know the reason as to why he hasn't finished yet. That's obviously information that we're not going to have until we have an interview with him or he speaks next time he does, whenever that is. Now, that being said, if you follow the history of Toriyama, you kind of know the kind of writer that he is. Toriyama as an artist is absolutely stellar. If you've never read the original manga, even if you haven't read it, obviously you can tell how good of an artist he is based on his designs for the Dragon Ball anime and the video games he's done, Chrono Trigger, of course, and things like that. He just has a very unique Toriyama-esque style that I think people just all around the world love. But if you really look at the manga, you can see how much of a damn incredible artist this guy was, even in parts of Dragon Ball that aren't as great as other parts. You know, some folks don't like the Buu saga, for example, but the art in the Buu saga has always been amazing. Now, as a storyteller, though, Toriyama has always been a gag manga writer. In other words, Toriyama's stories are not meant to be taken seriously, even though there are parts of Dragon Ball, like the Frieza saga and the Cell saga, that are pretty grim sometimes and pretty dark and has this sort of looming terror to it. Toriyama's never really been the kind of guy to keep darkness for too long, which I think is why people like Dragon Ball, because it is pretty lighthearted despite it having some dark moments. But Toriyama as a writer, again, much more of a comedian than anything else, but the guy loves his kung fu movies, which is why he is so skilled at drawing these incredible fight scenes. And that's a big reason as to why Dragon Ball was so popular all around the world. Now, one thing that people have to remember about Toriyama, he is often referred to as being lazy, and I can understand why people would say that, but it's more so that he's really a procrastinator. That's how Toriyama is. In studying his interviews and interviews with other people like his editors and things like that, Toriyama would often not submit a chapter during the weekly Shonen Jump days until right before publication. This dude would literally spend the first 3 or 4 days of the week just goofing off, playing with model cars and watching movies and video games. This is all documented in interviews with him. And he wouldn't even start writing the damn manga until days into the week. And this is when he had to maintain a weekly schedule. And somehow the dude still got his chapters done, which means that he must have just been cramming his right hand. Well, that sounds weird, but he must have just been working his right hand really hard. Okay, you know what I'm trying to say. He was working really hard to get everything done in time, and he never really missed a deadline. So that, to me, deserves respect. Also, Toriyama is a discovery writer. He's the kind of writer who does not really map stuff out in his head for too much forward. He just sort of writes as he goes along. And there are many authors that do this, Stephen King being one of them, who have made a lot of money with their art. So you have to understand that Toriyama has always been like this, even all the way back to the 80s. Now, when it comes to Dragon Ball Super, okay, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z were adapted as the manga was going on in Japan. Dragon Ball Super was a totally different situation. When it comes to Dragon Ball Super, his involvement in Super is not as heavy as it was with Dragon Ball and with Dragon Ball Z, because with those, shows, I guess, he was writing the manga and also helping the anime staff with filler and things like that, while also designing movie villains and just really contributing a lot. With Super, it's similar to that aspect, but there is no original manga. There's no Toriyama manga right now. Toyotaro is doing the art every single month. He is the one drawing the characters and doing panel by panel by panel, not Toriyama. Toriyama submitted before this Moro arc a outline of events, and then Toyotaro would put it to pen, and then Toei would adapt it to the anime. Now you have to remember, the first 2 arcs of Dragon Ball Super were movie retellings, and Toriyama, to my knowledge, was not involved in these movie retellings. A lot of the changes that were made specifically from Toei Animation. A lot of the stuff that was added, like Gotenks being in the Resurrection F arc and Tagoma being a more important player, that was not Toriyama. That was Toei making changes to the movie story. Battle of Gods was originally written by Yusuke Watanabe, and Toriyama came in and made changes and corrections to the script to make it more so his. Resurrection F was a script that Toriyama wrote without any real art, with the exception of the character designs for Golden, Frieza, Super Saiyan Blue, and whatnot, and the new characters, but he didn't really draw any fight scenes. Toriyama hasn't really done that in a while. Instead, he just sent them a script, and that became Resurrection F. And this is kind of the way that Dragon Ball Super was created. So you have the Battle of Gods and Resurrection F retellings, which many people say is Toriyama's idea. And a lot of folks have said that the reason why he wanted to do this is because he's being lazy and he just wants to retell those things and then tell a new story. And if you remember when we first got the announcement of Dragon Ball Super 5 years ago, Toriyama himself said, we have an exciting new story that I'm writing about traveling to Universe 6, which actually wound up being the Universe 6, Universe 7 tournament. It wasn't even like they were going on an adventure in Universe 6. It was just that tournament. And Toriyama, of course, designs the characters of Hit, Kaba. All the new characters we got was all Toriyama, and he sent them, of course, the outline for the event. Same thing with Toyotaro. Now, a tournament arc is pretty easy to write, but it's interesting how presumably Toriyama was writing this for several months, and that to me is kind of weird, and that to me makes me raise my eyebrow in knowing Toriyama that the dude probably didn't write anything until right before he sent it to them. That's just how he is, alright? It's kind of funny, but that's how he is. This is not one of those things where he plans everything out, like, for example, Oda from One Piece. This guy is not the same. And moving forward, if you remember too, there was talk that Toriyama was writing the Trunks arc for 6 months. And if you watch the Trunks arc, that's not really 6 months worth of writing. I mean, it's a very simple arc with not too much going on, and an arc that wasn't that complex when you think about it, except for maybe the time travel stuff. And again, Toriyama took his time. So it seems to me like, I don't know, man. He procrastinates a lot, doesn't he? That's what it sounds like to me. Of course, I'm not in the guy's house every day. I'm just theorizing based on knowing Toriyama and having knowledge of his history. So then we have a Tournament of Power, which again, Toriyama wrote the basic outline, the major eliminations, and some of the characters, like, the fat version of Ribrianne, no offense. Of course, Caulifla was created by Toriyama, but Kale was created by Toei. So there was a lot of extra stuff and collaboration going on with Toei and Toriyama, while simultaneously Toriyama was writing Dragon Ball Super Broly. Remember, both these things were going on at the same time. Pre-production for the movie and Tournament of Power. All that stuff was going on at the same time. And that to me is surprising considering where Dragon Ball is right now, where we're kind of waiting on Toriyama. So really, the main purpose of this video is to illustrate that I'm not surprised, even though I was surprised when I first heard it, I'm not surprised that Toriyama still has not submitted a story for Dragon Ball Super, because this is kind of how he is. He's probably not really being pressured to do so right now. It sounds like Toei's probably just going to capitalize off the profits from Super already, like the movie, of course, and the manga's still going to be running, of course, with Toyotaro at the head this time, and with the merchandise, the video games, which are always going to be out, Kakarot, all these things. And as I said in that other video I made, Toei does not want to proceed without Toriyama right now. They're going to have to at some point, but right now they don't seem to be ready to do that because they're worried about a Dragon Ball GT type situation happening, which is interesting because it's not so much that they're trashing on GT. Please understand this. That's not what it is. It's that GT's creative direction at the time with Kozo Morishita behind it was a little bit haphazard. It was a little bit, unorganized. And actually, ironically enough, Dragon Ball Super in the early days was also pretty unorganized. So not much has changed when you think about it. But they are kind of wanting to make sure that the fans and Toriyama himself is happy, because Toriyama was not happy with the original concept behind Battle of Gods, nor was he happy with Dragon Ball Evolution, and that's why he came back. So maybe someone has to piss the guy off again. I don't know, but either way, Toriyama being a procrastinator does not surprise me. And when he does come back with a new story, whether it be for an anime, for the manga, or for a movie, we'll all be waiting for it. It's just, the guy's always been like this, but now even more so he can be like this because he's obviously set for life. He's a very wealthy man. And because of that, he's not hungry. He's not trying to feed his kids because he's got so much money that he doesn't have to do it. And that's just how it is when you make it. You know, when you become a creative and you make it, sometimes you just don't want to keep working, you know, and some would call that lazy, but let's keep it real. Toriyama kind of earned that, you know, with all the years he put in. The dude was working nonstop from 1979 to 1997. Think about that. That is a long time to be putting out weekly manga with very little breaks. It was Slump, then Dragon Ball, and then he finally took a break in 97. Well, it was more so 95, but he did help out with other projects in 96, 97. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope I shed some light on Toriyama and his procrastination. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I love you all.